Welcome to the JFK Facts podcast. I'm not a technical person. But I'm very interested in, technology, and your work is just especially interesting in this field. So why don't we start by telling people what is Knott Laboratories? What do you do for a living when you're not doing a super interesting JFK project?
Yeah, so our day-to-day activities are forensic investigations. So we're a forensic engineering and visualization company. And what that really means is that we get retained to do some sort of investigation surrounding either generally associated with a litigation of some sort or an insurance situation.
Hmm.
And so somebody's looking for scientific answers to reconstruct or to figure out what happened in some incident.
Hmm.
So that's anything from accidents to shooting incidents, so vehicle accidents to shooting incidents to structural failures, um, and a lot of things around those various topics. So we have, I don't know, we have about 55 staff members. So that's our day to day is answering questions for somebody that wants to know what happened in some situation.
And how long have you guys been doing this?
So our company was started in 1982. It was founded right after the Hyatt Regency collapse in Kansas City.
Mhm.
And our founder, Dr. Al Knott, was retained on that to go do the investigation on why that failure happened. So yeah, so we've been in operation for 40 plus years now.
And what's your position at the firm?
So I'm the CEO and a principal engineer here. I'm a
Uh-huh.
structural engineer by education and have been with the company since 2010. And just kind of worked my way up through the company, done all kinds of different forensic stuff. Now work with all of the disciplines that we have, and specifically in the technology side of things, I push a lot in the 3D laser scanning and the application of that with both with accident reconstruction, shooting reconstruction, as well as on the structural side of things.
Mhm. So, which brings us to your work in Dealey Plaza.
Mm.
Um, you have done and will send people to the Knott Laboratory site to look at your digital reconstruction of the Kennedy assassination and resulting controversies. So, how did that come to happen? How did your company come to do this work of trying to understand, trying to recreate a shooting incident?
It stems from doing accident reconstruction as a whole. And in accident reconstruction, we're tasked with coming up with something that we can present to the courts as scientifically accurate. And it has to be provable, it has to be tested, so everybody's trying to tear apart your work that you've done on some case to prove that you did something wrong. And so that's kind of the bar that we're set out with. So
Mhm.
that's the background that we have. And we've done in the 2000s, early 2010s, we had started doing some reconstruction of shooting incidents, which is it's the same technology that we use for any vehicle collisions.
Mhm.
And so a gentleman by John Orr, he's a former district or a federal judge down in
Federal
Atlanta,
prosecutor.
federal prosecutor, sorry, yes, retained us to produce a reconstruction of JFK. It's nothing that we'd been involved in before. Didn't really have didn't have some specific interest in it or anything like that. It was really just another project that came across our desk as, hey, can you use modern science and technology to evaluate this? And so that was our initial start.
So John Orr is just another paying customer who comes to me and says, do what you do. That's
Exactly.
how,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
how it came about. So is a Dealey Plaza reconstruction, how does it compare to other shooting incidents you've done in terms of can you figure it out accurately? Do you have enough information? How does this compare to other case studies you've done?
with the technology that's advanced, so I would say in the 90s, it is the infancy of this, and then it starts to gain traction in 2000s is laser scanners. And so that's basically the canvas that we build off of. And so what that allows us to do is to go out and gather it's a surveying device. You go out, you set the surveying device on the ground on a tripod, and it spins around and it's shooting lasers out at everything that it can hit. And so you set that up in one location. It takes it grabs all of the three-dimensional points of everything within its line of sight that it sees, and then you move it, whatever, 50 yards down the site, and you do it again. And ultimately, you end up with millions of points that it has put a laser on, and it knows the exact distance of that. So you know the exact XYZ coordinate of that point, whether that's a building, a tree, a sign, anything like that. And it's
Right.
overlaying photographs on this as well. So you when so through the progression of this, these laser scanners have come to where we can create a digital twin of what exists now. So JFK and Dealey Plaza relative to other scenarios, largely everything's the same. There's been a few changes over the years. The signs have changed, the trees have grown, but there's a lot of stuff that's still there. The bridge is there, the buildings are there. The knoll is there, some of the structure on the knoll, the roadway is there. An interesting thing that we found through our analysis was we had to one of the things that was not computing was the roadway surface was not where it should be relative
Uh-huh.
to the historical photographs. Well, it was the overlays, where we've done additional layers of asphalt over the years on that roadway. But the curbs and things like that still existed. And so we can match up what existed in 1963 really well with what exists today. So relative to a modern reconstruction of something, um, you just have to take into context, how much has changed. Dealey Plaza has the big things haven't changed, and so the canvas and the digital twin that still exists for us to be able to build off of.
But surely, I mean, something like, is Elm Street 2 inches taller, so to speak, because of layers of asphalt? How do you factor in something like that?
So based on the concrete curb height that has not changed, but the asphalt has changed. So things like that, the building heights,
Uh-huh.
the window heights on these things, the building heights relative to each other. So all of these things can all get triangulated to make sure that those are still fitting in the same. They're still matching up with all of the historical photographs that exist of the scene at that time. So
Right.
that's the other component. Kind of the next thing is you start once you have this canvas developed, then now you can start to overlay the photographs onto that, and you can does everything match up? Does the grassy knoll, does the curb, does the sign, do the building lines, do they match up? And you're familiar with film and stuff. Film has a curvature to it. An eye, the lens distortion that happens from that curve. Well, we take those photographs and we remove those curves from it to make sure that everything's lined up, and then that's what we're overlaying with our digital twin or our canvas.
Mhm. How long does it take to do this?
Well, the analysis that we've done to date, and with the public information that's out there, was, I mean, this took a year of working on, but realistically, probably 4 to 6 months of kind of dedicated time that's
Mhm.
working on it. In between, you're waiting for information to come in and clarifying things and stuff like that. But about that time frame.
When did you put your scanners into Dealey Plaza?
So we've been there multiple times. We were there. I don't remember the exact date when we were doing this. This is 2017 or 2018 is when we had scanners there initially. We've been back and done additional scanning subsequent and just gathering more data. And I don't remember when that was done, probably 22,
Mhm.
just kind of filling in the gaps. Like I said, when you run these surveyors around, it's it only catches the data that it sees, right? So
Right.
if you're sign is blocking something, you don't see it. So you just have to move the scanner 3 feet and shoot past the sign. So anyhow, we've scanned it again, 22, something like that, but started in 2017-ish.
Uh-huh. And do by scanning more, do you gain confidence in the accuracy of your model? Or
Not necessarily being sure, it's more data to overlay to make sure that the coordinates are matching. The subsequent scans was newer scanners, and then filling in more of the gaps in the data sets that we had originally. Doesn't really change anything, but it certainly validates your XYZ coordinates of each of those points out there.
uh-huh. So John Orr is a former federal prosecutor with a strong interest in JFK. Um, and he puts this together. Do you have I mean, obviously, the single bullet theory, the forensics of the gunfire, right, of the
Yeah.
assassination are, of interest, are contested and of interest. So what what was the scope of work? What were you trying to determine with your model? Or is it open-ended? Can you do lots of things with it?
Yeah, so to answer the second question first, so the model's built, so now you can analyze this in whatever fashion you like. So, like by example, around the 60th anniversary, there were some doctors that had an interest in and they suspected that the shots may have come from the front, and it may have been a frontal entry to JFK's head, as opposed to an exit wound. And so you can look at the model and you can see that, okay, well, we can evaluate that to see if there's some place where that gunshot could have come from.
Mhm.
And based on the knowledge that I have, it has to come over the top of the windshield, because there wasn't any bullet holes in the windshield that would have corroborated that. So it has to come over that. So then you can look out on the front horizon and see if there's any place where that could potentially be. That's one analysis that can be done based off the canvas that already exists in the reconstruction of it.
What was John Orr hoping to accomplish? Was he just looking to
Yeah.
test the single bullet theory, which is, one aspect of the JFK debate, or was it more than that?
Um, it's for us, our assignment was specifically the science, reconstructing the wounds, the positions of the cars, the position of the limousine, Oswald's position on the sixth floor, and is that single bullet theory possible? Or John Orr um, has uh, a theory on which bullet is which, and where do these which wounds are which, and which where the ultimate bullet ended up in the limousine and so forth, and at the hospital and all of that. And so he wanted us to test that from a science perspective. Do these wounds and alignments of those wounds specifically with Oswald's position, can those align? So I mean, it's revolving around the single bullet theory, but it was really, this is me speaking in John's language. He thinks that these specific wounds are from one bullet, these specific wounds are from another. What does am I right, or does the science say something different? And he was really, it wasn't it wasn't anything to challenge the single bullet there. He was really questioning, does he have it right on which bullet is which, and how can all of these wounds correlate in alignment and so forth.
Right. So when you do that, what do you find? What do you find about Orr's hypothesis?
Well, personally, I think it's a valid hypothesis. Ultimately, the geometry of this, I think that the biggest component of it, and this is what we put in the information that we've published, is that for the entrance and the exit wound of JFK's throat, assuming an entrance wound in the back of the neck and an exit here in the throat, for that to be the same bullet that comes through the angle, the back shoulder of Governor Conley, out his wrist, and then ultimately embedding in his left leg, those don't align. There's actually a pretty good difference in the angle of those. And so
And
if that
so,
were to be,
and so just to for viewers and listeners, this is what's on your website is where we see this reconstruction and we see that those two lines don't match up, indicating that the single bullet theory couldn't explain those wounds.
that's right. Yeah. I mean,
Right.
the bullet has to come out of President Kennedy. It has to then jump to the right to make an entrance wound into Governor Conley. But not only that, the path that that bullet takes through Governor Conley down into his left thigh it creates an even further angle. So it's almost creating a Z type of pattern, if you will, on
Uh-huh.
how that bullet would have to progress to create those wounds.
Um, and is John Orr, is he satisfied with that answer, or are you working more to refine it or understand the data better?
So no, that's we finalized our work with him, and I'm not sure what he's doing with it or anything, if he
Okay.
is doing anything with it. But yeah, it answered the questions for him, and I think validated the opinions and the hypothesis that he had going into hiring us, I believe.
Yeah.
I don't know if anything changed
Yeah.
while during the
So
process.
so people can view these at knightlab.com,
It's Knott Lab, Knott lab.com. Yeah.
knottlab.com. So just to go back, so that's one aspect of the forensic debate. Um, we talked about um, what does your reconstruction tell us about the possibility of shots from the front? You talked about it has to come in over the windshield. Is that possible that a shot came from in front of the limousine and caused wounds to President Kennedy?
Well, I mean that was something that we quickly pulled up when that theory came out, and looking downrange, if you will, or from the front of the vehicle, there the only things that are down there in front of it is the bridge, and the bridge isn't high enough to have any association. You'd have to be, I don't remember the distance, but it was 20, 30 feet above the bridge to be able to miss the windshield and come into the front of JFK's head. So that's kind of an example of, there's lots of different people out there that are working on this, and um, you have to align all of the different disciplines in your evaluation. And
Mhm.
we can certainly look at that, and well, that doesn't work with the physical evidence that we have,
Uh-huh.
um, assuming no bullet holes in the windshield.
Right. Another reconstruction had been done in the 1990s. What's the difference between the technology now and then? You know, can we have more confidence in the later work because of the technology? Or
Yes, and I'm not familiar with the previous, as far as reconstruction or the methods that were used, um, and 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 really don't know anything about that.
right,
I can just speak to the accuracy of the modern technology. I mean, the laser scanners. I mean, this is like millimeter accuracy reconstruction of the scenes. And then when you're overlaying, so that entire process is you have that digital twin that you create from the lasers, then you're aligning limousine on top of that, and you're putting that back in. So through the primary piece of evidence was a Zapruder film, and that's just frame by frame. And so you're looking at frame by frame, where does that exist, and then now look 3D through that lens and put that limousine exactly where it was in the on the roadway,
right,
and then the next frame, and the next frame, and the next frame, and then come in and put Governor Conley, based on Governor Conley and JFK both back into the vehicle as they were, and that we looked at a lot of different images through the day. There's lots of images of the presidential motorcade traveling through Dallas that day, and so we looked at all of the different positions on where Governor Connally was relative. Sometimes he had his arm on the windowsill. Sometimes it's sitting in, and really trying to narrow down, exactly how far he was from the vehicle and could have been from the passenger side of the vehicle, and he also put them back into position, and then I mean, we've got weights and heights of these gentlemen, and all of those things. We've got the presidential limousine and the drop seat that exists in there. So, accounting for where Governor Connally sits elevation wise relative to the back seat of the limousine, and basically put all of those components back into a. I mean, it's insane the accuracy that you can create with a digital twin in modern sites, and that really is. I think 2010 plus, and then in 2015. So today there's so much video evidence. So a lot of our work today is we're actually putting those videos back into 3D scenes. And what I normally say is what you can generally see side to side in a picture, but you can never tell depth. Depth is an unknown in there.
Right.
Well, when you overlay that with a 3D environment, depth is now known. You know exactly what that distance is, and so in a lot of our cases, a lot of the questions come from we look at it from a video. Everybody sees the video on news, but the answers lie in the depth in that screen. And so a lot of times our answers come from take the screen from looking at this direction. Now that we have it in 3D environment, look down on it. And that's what will answer a lot of questions for folks. And just the accuracy it's just insane relative to the 90s and what's possible.
So you say down to the millimeter?
Yeah, I mean, the laser scans are accurate to 2 millimeters in, I forget, 30 yards or something like that. That's that accuracy, and then overlaying the photographs and everything like that. And I'll give you one more thing to it just to kind of talk to the accuracy. When we rebuild that scene, we're taking all of the photographs and every single Zapruder film frame, and we're laying all of those on together, and then those are tightening up your trajectory. So those do have to be positioned on the 3D environment. The 3D environment is phenomenally accurate. Now you got to get everything else on it exactly as it was. So the more data, the more photographs that you have, the more accurate you're able to align those things. But ultimately, you're talking really, really tight tolerances on the reconstruction of this.
Did you use any other photography besides the Zapruder film?
Yeah. There's photographs from the bridge. There's photographs from the infield, if you will. There was a lot of photographs that we have in our database that we use to position those. Yeah.
So the president also has a wound in his throat, but I think what you're saying about shots from the front, neither the wound, the head wound or the throat wound could be explained by a shot from the front because it would have had to have come from too high an angle.
That's right. Yeah.
Did you examine or analyze any other scenarios for the gunfire? Like, does the reconstruction give us an alternative explanation?
Doesn't yet. It gives us the trajectories of the two shots. What I would say is affirmatively two shots, not a single bullet. It gives us reasonable trajectories of those. The additional work that needs to be done now is to understand the timing of when. So if those are not the same bullet, that messes up the timing. Now those are two separate bullets. So now you've got four bullets that you have to account for. And so now you either the shot to Governor Conley had to be sooner based on the angles or something. So there's that component that needs to be further analyzed, and there needs to be a theory on kind of which bullet is which, and then you can back it and when did it happen, and that can help back into that, and then ultimately, and the most difficult component is the fatal wound, the fatal headshot. And and the reason that is difficult so far to reconstruct is that as as President Kennedy reacts to the first gunshot entrance, he leans forward, he grabs his throat, and his head turns off and down towards Jackie. And so when we're looking at the videos that show his head and that rotation of that, that needs to be understood, and that can there's some ranges that can be generated for that. But then the other component to it is the entrance and exit wound of the headshot. The entrance wound is pretty defined. The exit wound is not, because it broke out portions of his skull. And to my knowledge, it's not like that you can draw a straight line between an entrance and an exit wound on President Kennedy's head. So because of that exit wound and being hard to identify, really all that can be generated so far is a range of potential options where that bullet could have come from, to create that, and not near the same accuracy so far as like what we have for Governor, or for where Oswald was positioned.
And is this, I mean, if you have additional work to do, is John Orr paying for this, or how's that work going to get done?
Well, it's a lot of work, and so that's why we haven't taken it on ourselves. And John had, we'd wrapped up kind of our assignment and given back what he wanted us to do, and so we've just been honestly sitting on this information. There's more work that can absolutely be done. It's just finding time for our team to do it. We're busy.
So, but you see a research path forward for more to be done with your model.
I do.
Yeah. An understanding. Yeah. So, but just to summarize, you think that the film evidence and the reconstruction indicates only shots from the rear.
Yeah, specifically as it pertains to JFK, and I don't think there's any others that Oswald or that Governor Conley. There's, in the absence, I believe, because there's no bullet holes in the windshield. I don't believe that any of the shots are possible. I know we looked at that specifically for JFK's head. I don't think that we looked specifically for anybody else's, but all of those are closer and lower to the windshield.
I mean, there is this question of whether there was a hole in the windshield. Did you examine that or get into that, or address that question for yourself?
I'm aware of that, and I didn't reevaluate it after the theory was presented that it was an entrance wound for President Kennedy. That one, from recollection, it's off on the passenger side of the vehicle, and I don't think it was just going off of memory at this point, but I don't believe it passed through the windshield. I think it was a fraction.
One question was, whether it passed through the windshield or whether it was caused by debris from inside the car after the shooting.
Yeah.
Okay. So, but maybe a different way to put it is, so if there was a hole in the windshield, then you would have to reevaluate the lines and to to see. Would that be fair to say?
That's fair. Yeah.
Um,
Yep.
Another question. So you mentioned the fourth shot, right? We've got the shot that hit the curb and caused a slight injury to a bystander. Does your model tell us anything about the shot that missed? Can it?
Um, we didn't look specifically at it, and weren't asked to. I'm aware of it, and um, but I don't know the specific positions. I don't remember. I don't know how well documented or what evidence exists as far as where the chip in the roadway was and where that bystander was. With that information, it could be evaluated further, but it wasn't something that we were focused
Yeah.
on or
Well,
looking at. Yeah.
maybe that's something that some researchers might forward to us because there is a photographic record that bystander James Tagg spoke to people immediately afterwards, and there was a point in the curb where people said, "Oh, look, there's a chip there," and so I think that you could probably you could place that mark on the curb pretty accurately in your reconstruction. But then the question is, where did that bullet come from? It could come from anywhere, right? I mean, you don't have any additional.
Yeah, I mean, we're basing, we can only work off the physical evidence, and the we, with 2 points, we can trace back to
Right,
some place.
right,
That there's the assumption, in that the bullet didn't change trajectory
right,
upon impact or something like that. And those
right.
have to be evaluated. But with 2 points, you could certainly trace it back to what in our model. It's just, is that valid evidence to start
Right.
with?
Right. So you see a research path forward, but it would cost some money to pursue it, basically, right? It would cost people time, at least people's time, and time is money. So is that a big
Yeah.
job? I mean, if you look at what you'd like to do, just ideally from a research analysis point of view, what would it take to, explore these other questions that I'm raising?
It just depends on which question. Some of them are simple. I mean, if you came to us with the question of that, let's say that was a bullet hole in the windshield, and there's some evidence to suggest, or you wanted to trace that back to some other place based on a specific wound. That's relatively simple. The model exists. And that would be the simplest of forms. The more complex things is, and some of this, I think you're following along with the, I know you're following along with the document dumps and stuff from the federal government that all of us are wanting more from. But there's, any other video or photographic evidence that exists, overlaying those. That's where it starts to take a little bit more time. What would be notable for us is solid evidence on the entrance and exit wounds of President Kennedy's head, and more photographs or video that we could use to orient the position of his head, at that exact instant. Those would be big milestones, that would help take the investigation further.
Um, so you did not incorporate the Nix film? Are you aware of the so-called Nix film?
I'm aware of it, and I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the Knicks film, was filming during the day, and I think it turned on right when JFK, the headshot occurred. Am I remembering that correctly, Jeff?
Uh, yeah, I mean, Nix was he was closer to Main Street and the motorcade's going away from him, so he's just filming the last. So he's a lot farther away from Zabruder. He's across what you called the infield. But
Oh,
the the moment of the fatal shot is definitely captured in that film, albeit from a farther distance.
we've I we've seen it, and I think we used portions of it. I think when JFK comes into it, either it cuts off or it turns on, or it pans right at the time of the fatal shot, and so there's only like a frame or so that exists there, um, and it's from a distance away. I don't think that there was anything that gave us more scientific accuracy than what we had, and I don't know that there's something in there that allows us to help with the rotation of his head. Certainly the angle forward, but not the rotation, just based on where that film was taken from.
So to you, that's a key sort of unknown is what was that motion of his head? We see it, but you're trying to measure it very precisely, and you feel
Exactly.
like you can't quite do that right now, or
Yeah, because every the other thing is when we're putting these videos or photographs back into the 3D model, the other thing that we are looking at is we need we need things beyond um, the subject. In this case, it would be JFK's head. We need things beyond that, or in the foreground, that we can use to triangulate to put in, oh, that is, XYZ position here, this is XYZ position here, therefore we can put that rotation. So we don't have enough clarity in both JFK's head, as well as like something in the background, or preferably multiple things in the background that we can use to get the rotation correct. And so that piece, as well as the best information we could get as far as an exit wound, um, from the frontal lobe of JFK. Because if you think about that, I mean, this distance is only whatever 8 inches, and if we're looking at a 4 inch potential, anywhere in here could be the exit component. In anywhere in there, lining that up with the entrance wound in the back, at 8 inches, if you go back, 100 or 200 feet, that's a big area
right,
that we're trying to pinpoint.
right. Hmm. Um, are you saying, so how would you achieve more clarity on that question if in the absence of a new photograph or something, additional photographs?
Well, I mean, I was hoping that there might be additional photographs in the archives, or not in the archives, but in the documents that were getting dumped. The Nix film, and maybe you know more about this than I do, but um, it's there's some filming earlier in the motorcade, and then it comes on there right before the fatal shot. I don't know if that's just happenstance, or if that's something that's missing. That's been a question of mine, that might exist. Um,
Well,
if there was,
the question about the Nix film is, and this his granddaughter, Gail Nix Jackson, has taken this up. He gave the film to the authorities and to a wire service, and then the FBI had it. And what he got back was a copy. He did not get back the first generation copy. And so Gail has tried to, find out what happened to the first generation, because that would give more clarity, and in an analyzing, could be a significant improvement. Um, but her lawsuit basically found that the film did exist. It was sent to a tech firm during the congressional investigation in the 70s, and then it nobody knows what happened to it. So all we have is the copy. So that's kind of the backstory of the Nix film. Um, but to your point, the idea of a first generation film, that might be an advance for you in analyzing in making the Dealey Plaza reconstruction, no?
yes, it could,
Hmm.
because anytime copies are made, I mean, the quality of the images can be downgraded
Hmm.
from that. So yeah, absolutely. And
Hmm.
then the other thing would just be if there's um, potentially some, maybe medical or ballistics folks that had more information and that could tighten up that exit wound on JFK's head based on the information available, that's something else that would help us tighten up or could be put back into our model to be analyzed.
Hmm. Um, yeah, I mean, the problem is, and in JFK, everything is contested. Um, the authenticity or the integrity of the autopsy photos is also open to question. And there's a lot of testimony that the president's wounds were manipulated. The photos that were taken of it are not in the record. So can we trust what we do see in terms of the nature of the wounds and the exit wounds and all of that? So
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
it makes another layer of analytical uncertainty, I guess.
Sure.
Um, um, have you done this type of work on other, I mean, when we say shooting incidents, politically prominent shooting incidents? You've had an assassination attempts on President Trump. Have you done similar work in these sort of public controversies?
Um, Not in the public ones so far. We've not taken that on or been retained to do that. There certainly lots of shootings happen all too common today. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of cases that we're working on, and some of those are in the courts and active cases, and some of them are getting through the courts and getting
So
completed.
in a shooting incident, not JFK, say a criminal is, who's coming to you to get this analysis? Is it a police department or prosecutors or defense attorneys? Who's
Um, We've had a couple defense attorneys, but more plaintiff side attorneys that are asking for this reconstruction. We've done lots of presentations, kind of across the board for everybody, from plaintiff to defense to law enforcement. But the ones that have retained us so far have all been attorneys. I'm thinking about that as I say it, but I think they're all attorneys on one side or another that have done that retention. So
and what's the court's attitude about your technology and your evidence? And the court has to decide, is this admissible evidence? Is this trustworthy? Is this something that somebody's liberty should be decided on? What do
yeah,
the courts say about when they hear your evidence and assess it?
yeah, we haven't had any issues.
Mhm.
I mean, going back, there was a time frame where we were, our former. I'm a current owner of the company now, but our former owner was in the one that was actively bringing laser scanning technology into modern just acceptance in the courts.
Uh-huh.
And so there was a lot of engineering and scientific papers that were published and peer reviewed, all that type of stuff, and to make sure that everybody understood that that's all accepted. Laser
Mhm.
scanners are there now. The newest components are overlaying video in those and how that scientific approach has gone. And we haven't had any issues with getting our stuff into the courts. I mean, and obviously that's our business, so we work really hard to um, make sure that it's scientifically based, because that would be terrible for us if something did not get into the court after we put so much work into it for some client. So far we haven't had any issues getting our stuff in.
Okay, and these are adversarial proceedings. So if somebody was saying that's not right,
Very.
you're full of it, they could have brought those objections, and you haven't had anything like that.
Right, right. I mean, anything that we publish, we expect to be challenged by somebody with some pretty good qualifications. Adversarial attorneys are hiring whoever they can hire to try to poke holes in, and It's pretty commonly accepted. It has to be done right, and you can't skip any steps or anything like that. But when it is done right, you will absolutely come up with an accurate reconstruction. And that's there's varying degrees of the accuracy based on whatever the evidence of that specific case is. But yeah, it's getting tighter and tighter.
Yeah. Um, how many firms are there like this, like yours around the country who do what you do at the scale you do it?
Well, there's quite a few forensic firms. I would doing structural and mechanical reconstructions and things like that. The shootings are a specialty of ours, and there's very few. There's probably a handful of folks that are doing it well in the
And
nation.
is that because it's just more difficult or it's less common?
Uh, It's less common. Honestly, I mean, we've kind of transitioned from accident reconstruction. We still do a ton of accident reconstruction, but um, we've just been known to create these high precision reconstructions, and then our name is just kind of gone.
Yeah.
So,
So this is not just a technology that's widely used in the industry, but this is kind of your brand. This is your not laboratory specialty or
yeah, it's certainly a specialty of the companies.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
absolutely.
Shooting incidents.
Right, right.
Yeah. You're based in Denver. Is your work national or is it Colorado based or
No, it's national,
oh,
specifically with shooting incidents. It's across the nation. So we've done some presentations, stuff like that, across in Europe, and introduced more of this over there. But so far, all of our projects are nationally based. Yeah, yeah.
um, okay, Stanley. Well, anything else people should know about what you've done here? Um, I think we've covered a lot of it. Um,
Yeah, I think you asked great questions.
well, I
Absolutely
would,
believe in the
yeah. So
research.
I encourage people to go to knottlab.com and look for the what's it called? The JFK reconstruction. Knott
Yeah,
Lab presents a digital reconstruction and findings on the assassination of President John F. Kennedy. Fascinating stuff, Stanley. Thank you for doing that and taking the time to explain it to our readers. And, this interests me. Maybe there's another John Orr out there who wants to, advance this research more. Maybe there's people who have, photographic evidence about the chip in the sidewalk or the hole in the windshield. Um, and I'm glad to bring that to your attention. It sounds like that's information you'd be interested in having. And
absolutely.
and maybe maybe this can go to a next another phase of research because, like you say, there's still these outstanding questions. So
Yeah, absolutely. Well, really appreciate your time, Jeff.
thank you, Stanley. And maybe if we get more research done, we'll talk again.
Sounds great. All right.
Okay.
Thank you.
Take care.
All right.
Hey, everybody, I wanted to call your attention to one surefire way to deepen your knowledge of the assassination of President Kennedy. And that's to read my 3 books about the CIA, a trilogy of spies that tells how the assassination actually unfolded in the eyes of CIA insiders. You see, my work on JFK's assassination is rooted not in the literature of conspiracy, but in the history of CIA operations. And that makes all the difference when it comes to understanding the events that culminated on November 22nd, 1963. You'll want to check out my 3 CIA books that tell the story of the founding generation of the Central Intelligence Agency and what 3 insiders actually thought about JFK's assassination. Meet charismatic Station Chief Winston Scott as he surveils Lee Harvey Oswald 6 weeks before Dallas. Meet urbane CIA Director Richard Helms as he fends off President Richard Nixon's attempts to blackmail him over JFK's assassination. Meet James Angleton, the ingenious, paranoid, and sinister counterintelligence chief who had controlled the agency's file on Oswald since 1959. In these books, you'll see the real historical foundation of the events that led to President Kennedy's assassination, and you'll understand this event in a much deeper way. Check out my books at jeffersonmorleybooks.com. You can buy all of these books there, as well as my other nonfiction book, Snowstorm in August. So check out the Trilogy of Spies.